Mr. Dong, let me come to you first. How do you look at the ranking that we just talked about, Zhang Daqian topping the world in art auction sales even more than Picasso?
Well, some people may take it, regard it as a milestone because in the past few years, you did see Chinese names, names of Chinese artists appearing in the top 10 or top 20, and several of them together ranking to number 2, number 3. But this may be the first time, you have several different indexes from Artprice, ArtNet, and also TAFOV, and now Art Basel. But it's really a significant improvement made by, Chinese artist who is no longer living, but by the market who support his value in art history.
Mm-hmm. Are there something that we really need to pay attention here? Do we really need to read into the figures even more closely, Mr. Dong?
Yes, and I think global art market is quite a fragmented one, and it's not easy, never easy for even the most established organizations like Artprice to gather the most reliable statistics, especially those from China, because China, unlike in the more mature market like in New York or London, in China there are several hundred, if not thousands, of registered art auctions who have the license to sell the most expensive and those art pieces older than 1949. The line cut by the government, and every year it's a very tough challenge to collect all the figures, and it's very normal in China that after setting those records on the hammer, you still have to wait for months or even sometimes years to get the payment really settled. Mm-hmm. So at this moment, when we talk about the new records set for Zhang Daqian, and I wouldn't be surprised, maybe 20 or 30% are still unsettled yet.
We have to take it with a grain of salt. Now, Professor Burnett, for so long, global art sales have been dominated by Western artists. Do you see this pattern changing? More Chinese artists becoming more popular in the West?
Yeah, I do. I do think that there's been a trend for Chinese art to be very hot in the market for at least 1 or 2, maybe even 3 decades now. And I would anticipate that that trend would continue on into the future.
What are some of the driving factors behind this trend in your eyes?
Well, I think that the Chinese nationals are becoming more both worldly and moneyed, and are proud of their heritage, reasonably so, and are happy to accumulate art that explains who they are as a person, as a status, as a nation. And I think that we can expect people to proudly collect their cultural patrimony.
Professor Kuo, what is your...
yes.
Yeah, Professor Kuo, what is your take on the latest announcement of the ranking? Did it take you by surprise?
Actually, I'm not surprised because in the last year, 2016, Chinese, the market share of the art market is the third in the world, right after UK at the 21% and US at the 40%. And this trend of market dominance has been going on for about 10 years. And I think as the Chinese economy continues its course, and as the Chinese nationalism emerged, I think it's going to be continuing despite some of the up and downs, such as the late payment or non-payment in the Chinese market, but it will mature eventually.
Mm-hmm. Professor Kuo, what are the characteristics and the general trends of Chinese buyers according to your observation?
Well, I think as we all know, the value of art is not determined inherently by the artwork itself, is determined by culture, political issues, and therefore as the Chinese nation and Chinese culture becomes more confident as Chinese people begin to assert their cultural value. I think the art market will continue to flourish, and the value of Chinese artists, particularly masters such as Zhang Daqian and Qi Baishi, will continue to grow.
Mr. Dong, now last month, Zhang Daqian's work, Ancient Temples Amid Clouds, fetched 102 million Hong Kong dollars or 13 million US dollars. Did it catch you by surprise, this price? I mean, I guess this is not as high as Picasso's work on a, per painting price. How do you look at the price that was auctioned off for this one?
Of course, this is a remarkable achievement.
Yes, please, Mr. Dong, please.
Yes, it's a remarkable achievement in a relatively slow market. I mean, still being consolidated, but I think compared for the artist himself, it's among the highest prices, but not the highest, because Zhang Daqian already exceeded the 100 million RMB mark in China Guardian, the China Guardian auction a few years ago, and then several other exceeding 100 million RMB and even higher have been associated with Zhang Daqian and with a number of other Chinese modern and contemporary artists. But what I mean is, let's not be mistaken by the skyrocketing numbers achieved in 2016. It's not like buyers competing in the Olympic arena for gold medals, because these modern or classical Chinese paintings by those masters in Chinese art history were overwhelmingly, if not all, bought by Chinese buyers only. And although an increasing number, but still a small number of Chinese wealthy people are buying Western art, it's still not the case that Western people are starting to buy Chinese pieces. So it's undeniable that it's catching more attention for the Western world. The West has never been so prepared to listen and try to understand Chinese culture and Chinese art, but they are not ready yet to bid and compete against the most aggressive Chinese bidders.
Yeah, Professor Burnett, I'm really interested to hear your take on this. First of all, help us understand why the painting by Zhang Daqian, this one that fetched 13 million US dollars, why is it so beautiful from your perspective as a scholar who studies Chinese art and history?
Well, I think that Zhang Daqian's art generally is quite lovely and quite soothing to look at, so that it has an immediate appeal visually, but then the more you look at a good work of art, the more you want to look at it and spend time with it and learn from it, and it can expand your life and the way you feel about your life. I think that generally his art is so lovely. It's so abstract with the beautiful blue-green colors, which are referential to utopian periods, a utopia and a perfect kind of world. And within the abstract painting, there are gestures of landscape that give you a place to reside within the work. I think that people generally find his art so moving and gentle and beautiful to look at, and pleasant to have in the home or in one's environment. I can certainly understand anybody wanting to have a painting like that, and congratulations to the buyer.
Well, in terms of education to the Western students or people who are interested in Chinese art, how many resources are available if they are indeed interested? And do you think it is possible at all for more Westerners to start to be able to appreciate Chinese art, Professor Burnett?
Well, yes, of course. And you know, America, U.S. has been collecting Chinese art for well over a decade, not only a decade, but over a century. And so we have fine resources in the United States for people to go to study Chinese painting and Chinese art at various museums. Nearby me, it's the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. The Freer Gallery of Asian Art in Washington, D.C. is, of course, the first major collection to dedicate itself only to Asian art. And then, of course, there's the Met and Cleveland Art Museum and the Nelson Atkins in Kansas and the Boston Museum of Fine Arts and many, many others. Of course, there are many like me across the United States who teach Chinese art, and we are very excited to have enthusiastic students who come, some who are Chinese heritage students who come to my classes and say, oh my God, I never understood my heritage. I never knew this part of my heritage. I'm so thrilled to know this. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are students who are not Chinese heritage who find this equally fascinating and profound. I myself, in my first class in college in this subject matter, was immediately persuaded by my professor who, in just the introductory lecture, who started not only talking about the beauty of the work, but more importantly, perhaps, the philosophical and intellectual content that drives the artist to produce the work and to create something that makes a statement not just of what something looks like, but more a content that explores mm-hmm. the important aspects of contemporary life for that person.
Yeah. Professor Kuo, you have written extensively on Chinese art, and you have been teaching Chinese art and history in the United States. Has it been easy? Has it been difficult for you? How have been the reception of Westerners towards Chinese art and history?
Well, as Professor Burnett has mentioned, Americans have been collecting Chinese art for 100 years over, and they are still being collected by Americans or Europeans. But I think it's very important to know that the American interest in Chinese art sometimes has to do with their fascination of the exoticism in Chinese art. So it's very important to understand that the American collection of Chinese art has a lot to do with American perception of Chinese culture as a whole. And as China becomes more prominent in the world stage, I think American people would like to understand more about China in general and Chinese culture in particular. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be very important to keep things in perspective, mm-hmm. that if Chinese nation becomes more prominent in the world stage and interaction with other countries continues, I believe that there will be a lot of potentials for Chinese art outside China.
Mm-hmm. Finally, really quickly, 20 seconds, Mr. Dong here. How do you look at the future involvement of art auctions? Are we going to see more Chinese artists making the top rankings?
Absolutely, yes. I think this is a general trend. The general trend has been there for a while, and it will continue to be so, because Chinese auction houses are catching more attention from another generation, which is even more promising than the older one in the art market. And at the same time, more Chinese are scattered around the world, and they are paying attention to art in their homeland, and they will be, more aggressively collecting, and they will take art not only as a product for investment or collection, but for consumerism and for decoration of their homes. And I'm really optimistic about its prospect.
Mm-hmm. But it's still going to take some time. Anyway, that's all the time we have for the discussion. Many thanks to Paul Dong, lecturer at Tsinghua University School of Economics and Management, Professor Katharine Burnett at the University of California, and Professor Jason Kuo at the University of Maryland.